Okay, can I start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Good evening from Global Inclusive Education Network. Welcome to all of you. And I'm really happy to see the overwhelming response from all of you. And today, more than 3,000 people registered for this webinar. And therefore, I would like to thank to all of you participants for this program. Before starting the program, I would like to give clear overview of the Global Inclusive Education Network. The purpose of the Global Inclusive Education Network is that to bring all the professionals from the different fields who work in the field of disability and inclusive education across the country and across the world, and to share all the kind of the information, like innovative information on inclusive education.
Your voice is gone.
And to share the innovative idea on inclusive education, practice-based evidence, field-based experience, research, finding, academy, and so on. And therefore, it is important for Global Inclusive Education Network that to bring all of them together on the common platform and to share and to practice for this one and to make inclusive education more effective. I'm happy to inform you that till now, Global Inclusive Education Network along with DISABILITIES and Brotherhood conducted many national and international conferences on inclusive education, and we also started the webinar thing last year because of the pandemic, and till now we got very good responses, and I am sure that because of your continued support we will expand our services. You are always welcome to give more ideas, more themes for the future webinar. So that was your. The most important is that it is decided now we are also announcing another conference at on November 2021 on the theme of impact of COVID-19 on the education of children with disability. And we invited many different professionals, not only special educator, but inclusive educator, psychology, physiotherapy, those who are working in the field of inclusive education. We invited the paper. I hope all of you will participate in November 2021 conference on that same theme. Second one is that before starting this one, I would like to give the idea, chat one brief idea because Satish Kapoor, she will give overview of that webinar today. Because of National Education Policy 2020, need for the digital education, revamping school curriculum and everything, and development of e-content for children with disability, we thought this is the right time to invite NCERT team and panel and a team to share their guidelines so that we will get clear picture from them and we can work further. They will give you idea, so I'm not repeating all these ones. I would like to request all participants that if you have any queries, any question, please type in the chat box. Mr. Rajiv Kumar Sharma will anchor question and answer session. So please write your question in the chat box. Please don't use your mic at the alt or mute, please, this one. Now, before starting the program, I request Professor Srilata Chua, Center for Equity for Family and Children, TISA, to pay tribute to late Professor N.K. Changira. Srilata, please join.
Thank you, Professor Limaye. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to say a few words about Professor Jangira. I recall about over 8 years ago, the Center for Disability Studies and Action, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Brotherhood, closely collaborated to work on inclusive education and guidelines. And Professor Jangira was our advisor, our mentor, and a person who guided us. My experience of having interacted with Professor Jangira is a rare human being who displays humility, who displays simplicity. He's a package of simplicity and humility and a lot of wisdom, a fountain of wisdom. In fact, it is he who encouraged us to initiate the Global Inclusive Education Network. I pay my respects to him, and I pray that he will continue to bless us and guide us from above. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Srinata Chua. Now I recommend Mr. Chatish Kapoorji to brief about webinar. Mr. Chatish Kapoorji, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Respected speakers, on behalf of GIEN team, yes. I would like to thank all the speakers, mainly Mr. Rajneesh ji and Professor Anupam Ahuja. I am very grateful to our august audience for their registration to this webinar. It is you who made this webinar a grand success. Friends, online teaching and learning has become the norm during the pandemic. While not having been trained to combat the difficulties and the challenges of online education, teachers across India have managed, but with multiple challenges and varying degree of success. There have been considerable changes in communication between teachers and students and the realization of the teaching learning process. Families have also become engaged and accountable in the education of their children to some extent. Along with the technological and logistical challenges, there have been adverse psychological consequences of online learning too. I got chance to look into the guidelines for the development of e-content. We are from these guidelines, we are looking forward how language and subject teachers, IT professionals can use these guidelines for the development of e-content. Can we see when teachers will teach all children, including those who cannot see or hear or having learning difficulties? Will these guidelines help in taking online classes with more additional features? Will these guidelines help in the assessment as well? Also, all participants are looking forward to knowing how these guidelines or accessible standards will help to bridge the gap between the content providers, teachers, and students at large. In 1997, we at Brotherhood organized a workshop on how technology can help in teaching all students in a classroom. We invited Professor Isaac from IIT Delhi in the presence of the then Education Minister, Dr. Harshvardhan. This subject is very close to our heart, and to prove this, I conceptualized and produced Indian National Anthem in Indian Sign Language, featuring Amitabh Bachchan, which is the only accessible video on national anthem of any country according to UNESCO. Dear friends, we are looking forward when we will have teachers for all and all educable children will learn together. And I'm sure these guidelines developed by the Ministry of Education will help enroll all of us in the teaching community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank Mr. Kapurji. Okay, thank Mr. Kapurji. Okay, so I request Mr. Rajanish Kumar, who is the Director of Ministry of Education, Government of India, to talk on the importance of digital education and policy measure. I am requesting Mr. Rajanish Kumar to come and talk.
Thank you, Sandhya ma'am. Thank you, and it's a privilege to be in the midst of so many people who are dedicated to the cause of the Divyang children. And as all of you know, through the policy initiatives and also through the policy framework, that the national education policy has been very emphatically stressing on the need for content for these Divyang children. In fact, in this 65-page document, about 42 times the word CWSN, Divyang, disability has appeared. So the important points pertaining to CWSN in the NEP 2021, that we have to extensively use technology in teaching and learning, removing the language barriers, increasing access to Divyang students in education planning and management, a rich variety of educational software for all the above purposes has to be developed and made available. So to fulfill this mission, we have just a month ago released the CWSN e-content guidelines, which basically talks about how to develop guidelines for the various categories of the disabilities. Some are common, some are uncommon. And the thrust is, of course, on the UDL, the Universal Design of Learning. And then one more important thing is that all such software should be available in all Indian languages and accessible to a wide range of users, including students in remote areas and, of course, Divyang students. So what we want to do through these guidelines is, at the central level, of course, we'll develop guidelines, but at the state levels and at individual levels and at private initiatives, all of them should start developing content regional languages and take the help of NCERT, CIET, CBSE, NIOS, and all other bodies. And eventually, all this should come on the One Nation, One Digital platform called Diksha. So I would now just request the whole group to disseminate these guidelines, and also to tell you that these guidelines are not something which is patthar ki lakir. They're subject to change based on technology, based on experience, based on the type of content that we create. And of course, the end product is that the Divyang children must be served very well in all languages and all state of society. Thank you very much, and I welcome all of you to the seminar and the debates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajanish Kumar, to talk about the importance of digital education. And I am sure all of us are learning about that how to work the digital form into the practice world. Once again, thanks, and hope to continue your support in the future. Thanks a lot. Now, I would like to invite Professor Anupam Ahuja, chairperson of the team for the developing guidelines for e-content for the children with disabilities and director of NCERT. She will give the overview of the e-content guideline and adaptation of the accessible digital textbook. Professor Anupam Ahuja, please come.
Thank you, Professor Sandhya ji, and thank you, Rajneesh ji, for the start of our long webinar, in which, as has already been mentioned, we'll be very happy to share what these guidelines are all about. And I will begin with providing you an overview of these guidelines. And along with me, I have the expert committee members who will also be sharing their experiences with you as we go along in this webinar. So for sharing my thoughts, I will be using a PPT and focusing on a few aspects which will help you understand how these guidelines were formed. You've more or less got a hang of why these guidelines are there, but how they have been conceptualized, and what is the process that was involved, and what were the principles that govern it, we will look at closely in the next 20 minutes. I will also be using a section of these guidelines in detail. I'll be talking about how we can make accessible digital textbooks. Now, I begin with showing you all participants who are with us. This is the cover page of this guidelines that we are going to be talking about. It's the title is Guidelines, as we have been saying, for the development of e-content for children with disabilities. Just 5 weeks ago, we had the pleasure of our Honorable Minister of Education releasing them, and this was what is now in public domain. And I will start with giving you a little detail about the process of the development of these guidelines. It's been a process. It's been a process which has taken a little over 9 months. A baby is fully, robust and live and kicking. In the last 10 months, we have worked as a team, and a team was nominated of experts by the Ministry of Education. Expert members, we co-opted other experts, and we had long sessions of brainstorming, which and thinking and writing, which gave rise to a draft of these guidelines, which was submitted to the MOE. And then we got inputs from, of course, the MOE and many disability organizations, parent groups, etc., etc. The draft was widely distributed, and we incorporated all the suggestions that we had. We got very valuable thoughts came pouring in, and the guidelines, as I just mentioned, were released in last month on the 8th of June. Now, giving you in a nutshell, the guidelines comprise of 11 sections, and there are 2 appendices, and these can be downloaded from the MOE website and also from the NCRT website. All good things come with a price, but this good thing comes free of cost to you. And I urge all the participants, as was just mentioned by Rajneesh, to please download these guidelines and use them. Now, the media has picked on our guidelines and has reported extensively on these guidelines. And I think it's worthy to look into what the media has said, because each organ, each wing, or each media house has interpreted and given their own own descriptions, and it gives us a lot of food for thought. So I just in this slide have very briefly tried to portray to you what who all have been very active in responding to the release of the guidelines, and I urge you to look at them. So this very briefly is the process that we adopted. We've also want you to know the purpose of these guidelines. And for this, I have got a very short but a very emphatic assertion. As was just mentioned by Rajneesh, the NEP 2020. We all know that it is a very, very pro-inclusion and catering to the needs of all children. So we know that the NEP has talked about equitable and inclusive learning for all. And it says that the children with disabilities have to be given the same opportunities. I underline the word same opportunities for obtaining quality education as any other child. And this is a lofty goal. And this is what really triggered us to think about how we can actualize this lofty goal. If we look into our legal documents, the RPWD Act 2016 also has the same intention, and it also says that schools have to provide inclusive education and students with and without disabilities must learn together, and the system of teaching and learning needs to be suitably adapted to meet the learning needs of students with disabilities. So you see the NEP, the RPWD Act, the Act before this, the RT Act 2009, the legal frame is very clear with this assertion. If we look into our SDG goals, they also sing the same song. They also say that we need to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Now, this common thread that I've just talked about, which runs across our acts, the policy, and the conventions, this is what has given us the rigor and the to explore how we can provide equitable opportunities and promote inclusive education for all children. So this, my dear participants, is really the purpose of our guidelines. We also would like to tell you that the lack of accessibility, what research has told us and what observations in the field tell us, that the lack of accessibility continues to be a major barrier in providing equitable learning opportunities to children with disabilities. And this issue has become more visible during the COVID pandemic that has been part of our lives, unfortunately, for the past few months and almost years now. So with this as our background, we have put together the guidelines, and they aim to promote the development of high quality, accessible content for children with disabilities. And as we have been saying, to strengthen the momentum for inclusive classrooms, as has been envisioned in our NEP 2020, which has come to us after a long wait. It's been 30 years that we have waited for this policy, and it's really time that we begin with full seriousness onto the assertions that have been made in the policy. I want to take a few minutes now to make you look at what really happens in our schools. I think without really peeping back into the school classrooms, we will not really be able to get a proper overview of the guidelines. We know that we have worked relentlessly for now over 7 decades in an independent India. And we have, to a large extent, got children into our schools. However, we are aware that still there is a lot of exclusion. And this exclusion makes some children happy. You know, I mean it. Some children are happy that they're not in schools, whereas there are others who look at children who walk into schools with a sense of, oh, I wish I could also be in schools. Now, this exclusion that we are talking about here is really seen in big numbers for children who come from disadvantaged homes, from children who have disabilities, as was just mentioned, the Divyangjan. Now, this exclusion of the Divyangjan, of children who come from disadvantaged homes, and many others, has often, as we all see if you look closely into schools, have a social, economic, and sometimes there is a gender discrimination also, and children with disabilities often are also left out. Now, let's also look at what happens in the school. I've tried to show through these happy and not too happy children faces in a cartoon form that many children who we feel are in our school and have been there for so many years, if you look closely, some of them are not really happy. And you know, this, sometimes they conceal it, sometimes it becomes very visible. But this lot of unhappy children are the ones who could very unknowingly sometimes slip out of our systems. And that is why our NEP says that we have 3.2 crore children who are out of school. And this is in the age group of 6 to 16. And it is this that we have to keep in mind when we are looking at inclusion. We also need to know that, I repeat, that children with disabilities need to participate fully in regular schools. Only then can we change really the scenario that's existing from unfriendly learning environments for some children. Now, what we are really wanting is friendly learning environments. As I've showed in this visual, these two children, a girl and a boy, represent them all, and so do all the cartoon faces. We are looking for friendly learning environments which provide joyful experiences for all our children. Now, these guidelines have really been created to create this joy, create this fun, and this longing for all children to come in to our schools and stay there. The guidelines have been framed to develop e-content, not just how to develop e-content, but also the pedagogy. Because without the pedagogy, what I've just mentioned is not going to be fulfilled. And they should meet the learning needs of all children, including children with disabilities. All my colleagues who have worked very hard for these guidelines believe in these two lines that I'm now going to tell you. That children who learn together, learn to live together. And children who live together, live to nurture an inclusive nation. And that's what NEP is asking us to do. Create more vigor in the inclusive aspects of our nation. And we also believe, all of us, that if a child can't learn the way we teach, I'm using words of Estrada, maybe we should teach the way they learn. So this is what I wanted you to peep into for inclusion, as this sets the stage for what next I'm going to say. The guidelines that have been developed have been framed on 4 cardinal principles. And these principles, I think it's important that I share them with you, because that'll help you understand the what of these guidelines. We have constantly been governed by one basic thing that has churned our entire effort, that children should be able to perceive the content that we give them by using any sense. It could be sight, it could be touch, it could be their hearing abilities. Now, the guidelines are based on the principle of perceivable. They should be operable. Children should be able to control and manipulate the content that we give them, whether it's through the use of a keyboard, if they can't use a mouse, or a mouse. And children must also understand and comprehend the content and the operations. For example, the instructions that we give them. The how to use must be very clear. The last principle that we have not lost sight of is the fact that the guidelines are framed on the principle of the e-content being robust. Now, what we mean by this is that children should be able to access the content on a wide range of devices. You know, a child may just have a smartphone and may not, it may not, be something that he may dream of having a desktop, but it may be just a borrowed smartphone that he has from his elder brother. So the guidelines, the e-content material that we produce should be operatable on a desktop, a laptop, or a smartphone. And even when technology changes, this should not change. So these are the principles that have governed our e-content guidelines. And we have interlinked the components of accessibility, accessible e-content. We are very clear that the content that we provide must have a link with technology. And the content and pedagogy cannot be bereft of the content and technology cannot be bereft of pedagogy. So only when we have this interlinking of these components will we really have accessible e-content. Now, if we are going to talk about making this interlinkages and producing e-content, we cannot do anything and everything. We can't do it just the way we like it. There are certain standards and guidelines for all these 3 components, and we have recommended them with a sense of great importance. My colleague who is with me will be shortly talking about these standards and guidelines with you in further detail. I also would like to tell you now a little bit about the structure of this document that we have produced. Of course, we began with an executive summary and introductions and rights of persons with disability. Now, the standards that I've just talked about are covered both mandatory and preferable in section 3 and 4, and these will help you really understand the importance of why we have done that, these two sections. And then we have also got a section which I'm going to talk about shortly about how we will adapt our printed textbooks into accessible digital textbooks. The guidelines talks about this. My co-members who are with me are going to shortly tell you about, take you through section 6 to 9 of these guidelines, which will tell you how we can adapt them according to all the guidelines, how we can use them for all the disabilities that are there in the RPWD Act. And we are not confining only to academic components. We are also talking of non-academic. For example, if a teacher is making something for children about how to, be cautious during earthquake time, she needs to do it for all children. She cannot leave some children behind. So the e-content for children with various disabilities, for which I've just talked about, both the academic and the so-called non-academic, and that deals with their personal adequacy in daily living skills will be talked about. We have a very rich 2 sets of appendices also with the guidelines that come, and the appendix 1 talks about very clear guidelines for production of sign language videos. Satishji talked about how Janagan Man, we probably are the only country which has signed our national anthem. So the guidelines for producing sign language videos have been mentioned in the appendices. Section 10 and the appendices 2 gives you guidelines for facilitating, how children will comprehend content, how they will participate in the classroom, and then the focus, of course, is always on achieving desired learning outcomes. The appendices in this document number 2 talks about UDL aspects in greater detail. Now, we have a section 11, unless you think that I'm going to stop. No, we have 11 sections. The last one talks about how we will implement a roadmap. I will now take you through a glimpse of how we can adapt our textbooks, the printed one, and the guidelines talks about this. And this is a major chunk of these guidelines because we know that printed textbooks cannot serve all children. So how do we prepare from the printed textbooks, prepare accessible digital textbooks based on UDL principles, as Rajnishji said right at the outset. Accessible textbooks, digital forms by themselves, an e-book is not accessible to all children. So we in the guidelines have talked about how we can make accessible digital textbooks based on UDL principles. Now we have culled upon our own experience at NCERT, and we have also culled upon a lot of review that the entire team did on material produced by UNICEF on accessible digital textbooks as well, using UDL for learners with and without disabilities. We know that we have to understand first, before we jump into the domain of developing accessible digital textbooks, all of you must be wondering why this new term Anupam is using. Why is she talking about ADTs? I mean, there must be some rationale. Yes, there is, my friends. The rationale is that printed textbooks, as I just mentioned, cannot offer all features needed to ensure access to students with disabilities. Many digital books, as I just mentioned, are not accessible to students with disabilities. Now, ADTs, that is accessible digital textbooks with UDL, provide substantially equivalent, I wouldn't say totally equivalent, but substantially equivalent access to children with disabilities. Now, the ADTs actually, friends, lead to true inclusion because it is giving one book to all. It's not saying, oh, you cannot see as well as others, so here is a Braille book for you. Oh, you cannot hear as well as others, well, then you just, try to find a peer to help you. And maybe then we will manage some abridged form of the text for you. No, that's not what EDT is all about, because we are recommending, let me tell you, with a lot of caution, I'm saying this, but with a lot of positivity also, I'm saying this, that we have recommended in our guidelines that charity begins at home. So NCERT will take the lead in this, and post the NCF framework, the National Curriculum Framework based on NEP 2020, we are going to begin the process by creating books that are born accessible, so that sets the tone. And we are doing all this, you know why? Because all research globally, nationally, you pick any research document on inclusion, it tells us that it's the most cost-effective way of using our resources, and it improves the performance of all children in our classrooms. So with this, I take you through the next part of understanding very quickly, just like I made you glimpse through our inclusion, a little about that. Let me quickly take you through the universal design for learning. Why are we using this acronym again and again? Well, let me just take the example of 3 children in a classroom. We all know children have varied backgrounds, strengths, needs, and interests. Here is this one child who says, I learn when I see pictures. Here is another girl. She says, I learn when text is read aloud. And there is yet another Einstein in the making who says, I learn when I conduct experiments. Now tell me, do these 3 children not have the right to say what they are saying? Do you participants in this webinar not agree with me that we have to provide each child cater to each child's learning style? They're not asking for the moon, they're just asking for us to look at the way they learn. So what we also know through research is that the way children learn is unique, and as unique as their fingerprints. So if it is so unique, then we need to understand how we can use the universal design of learning to minimize the barriers. There are a number of barriers. I showed you right in the pictorial depiction right at the beginning that many children are leaving our systems. So how do we maximize the learning for all students? That's what UDL helps us. It says learning for all students is what we need to work towards. It also tells us that there are 3 principles that govern UDL, and it says that we cannot just present content in one way. We have to find multiple ways of presenting our content. It cannot be only text. It cannot be only print. It cannot be only digital. It has to be digital, print, text-to-speech, braille, videos with closed captions, audiobooks, sign language videos. Then we cannot just ask all children to take a CBSE class 10 and 12 exam during 3 hours and prove their worth. No, we have to give students, and not at class 10 and 12. Early on, we have to give students abilities. We have to give them opportunities to express themselves in different ways. That's what UDL allows teachers to do, to help them assess children in different ways. Whether it would be a comic strip that they can just draw to show that they've understood, or click a video and post it for the teacher to see, draw a painting, or do an assignment. They look far-fetched, but they are doable. We at NCERT have been working very hard to see that all this is doable. And we must remember that all this will happen if we provide access to assistive devices and regular and positive feedback. We must also give multiple means of engagement to children. What fires one student may not fire another. Give students the choices to fuel their interests and their autonomy, and help students to take risks. Because if they take their own risks, they may not do too well. But in life, they are learning. We are preparing them for life. And if we have ignited a fire in them to learn, they will not leave and go. They will not slip out of our school systems. They will not increase the dropout numbers. This is what UDL says, and that is why we say constantly that our accessible digital textbooks must be UDL based. I also want to draw your attention, friends, that all that we are saying is not just learning from books and research from elsewhere. We at NCERT have developed exemplar materials for the last 5 years based on the principles of UDL and worked really hard to prove that this is possible. We have also looked into the development of prototypes of ADTs by UNICEF and its partners, as I just mentioned, and we have included them in our guidelines. I would like to bring to your notice that there is a reading series which is by the name Barkha series. It has 40 storybooks, and these have been developed based on UDL principles. We have adapted these books in NCERT, and we take pride in saying that they are now a series for all. We have done adaptations in both print and digital versions, and these are all research-based additions and innovations. And we have received inputs from disability experts, IE experts, special educators, teachers. We went round the country and tried out these editions, and then we tried them out in varied settings. And finally, after a lot of hard work, brought out the final version. Based on our learning on that what we have got for you from these series, there is a digital version and you can download them again. This also comes free of cost. We don't ask you to disclose your identity. You can just go to our NCERT website and you have them available for your children. Please do use them and see their work. Let me quickly draw out some learnings that we got from this experience and how we have used them in developing textbooks already. It has clearly told us, our experience with Barkha, that it is very useful to have an introduction to a topic. And this introduction, if it's in the mother tongue and the dominant language and sign language, at the beginning of each section or a topic, it really helps. And this again is something what NEP 2020 is also saying. Mind you, we had thought of this in 2017, and this came through our conclusion from research. It also says that it is very useful that teachers need a how to use. They need instructions, you know, everybody is not savvy. And that needs to be provided both to teachers and to children. We need to provide descriptive hyperlinks to access supplementary and additional material. You know, you can't go everywhere looking for them. If that hyperlink is there, a teacher and a student and a parent will click on it and use it. It's always useful to use simple, easy to read language. Do not show your children that you can write in a complicated way. That's not expected of any teacher, any parent, any writer. And it's always important that we must remember this, that children will get stuck up with words that they don't know. So providing a glossary linked with specific words there and then on the page is very useful. Explaining new concepts in multiple ways is something that's worked well, and providing linkages between textbooks and concepts and activities, showing images that support that, and the purpose of the activity helps a lot. Testing the content. Please do not jump at final conclusions. When you do something good, we experience it. We wanted the world to know. We wanted to use it. But it's always important to first try out the material with the actual target group before you upload it on any portal. We have used this learning into developing prototypes of books, prototypes of stories, folk tales, and poems from our own books. These are some names that you have. In our guidelines, we have given links to these stories and the poems. You can see them at length. All you have to do is go and after the webinar, download our guidelines, and you can see how Choose Kid Goes to School is now a different story, not just a story that a child will read in print, but a story that comes with a sign language video, with subtitles, and many, many more things. I'm not going to share everything. I want to raise that curiosity. There are audio versions of Choose Kid Goes to School. So children now will have to choose from good options. बहुत सारी मिठाई है, कौन सी pick करूं is what a child will now have to think. All you have to do is to link go to the links and see them. And these links have been carefully incorporated of all these poems and stories, what we have done in our textbooks, in the digital version of the books. I also want to draw your attention to the UNICEF experience. It's very worthy of noting that they have worked for a long time, and they have also seen that the content can be presented in multiple ways, and how we can work on accessible digital textbooks. They have talked about how we can highlight text, how we can, switch on and off the volume of an audio, and how closed options can be turned off and on. And there are multiple options provided to learners to demonstrate their understanding of the content there and then. So the student gets a feedback from this material, not waiting for a teacher to say, not waiting for a parent to say, but it just comes from the book itself. So all these are, the links are given in our guidelines, and we urge you to closely study them and use them. I end by saying once again what Rajneeshji said right at the outset: please download these guidelines, and create your own accessible content, because our goal is one, and that is promoting inclusion. That is what we have agreed to all do. As was mentioned right at the outset by him, I repeat that. I promise you we didn't work on this together. We all tend to think alike and request you to do this. The guidelines, we repeat, are dynamic. They are not etched in stone. They need to be improved based on experiences. And all of you who have come here with us to learn about them, please read them carefully, discuss them with colleagues. Based on that, draw your own experiences and share it with us. Let's also remember that technology is not going to stay the same. The advent of new technology is also likely to bring in changes in the guidelines that we have prepared for you. However, it's a start that we have made, and together we can work on it for creating schools for all our learners. Let's remember not to leave any child behind. The e-content makes this possible. Thank you very much for your attention. And we look forward to your valuable feedback and suggestions for improvements. And I finally say thank you for this time and your patience to listen to this overview and description of accessible digital textbooks. Over to you, Sandhya ji.
Thank you very much, Professor Anupam Ahuja, for explaining in detail. And you did a wonderful job, because it is not very easy to make inclusive education very effective, because I was at a part of that long back. Where was the inclusion that time? This one. And this is the radical reform of that curriculum, this one. And it may take the time for many of us to understand the process and how to change the current curriculum based on the guidelines for each country. And I think, I'm sorry that I think that it is a too short time for all of us to understand, because we need to understand, we need to apply it. So it takes the time. Sorry, Professor Anupam Ahuja, we would like to invite you again. If many of you want to attend the refresher course or 1 day, 2 days workshop, just only understanding the guideline for developing it content, Professor Anupam Ahuja, if they want, we would like to have you to be part of that in the future program. Okay. Thanks one again, Professor Anupam Ahuja, for that with one. And I would like to invite the other member, that Mr. Dipendra, who is the managing trustee Taksham. He will talk about accessibility standards and guidelines, because what Professor Ahuja mentioned, that it is a focus more on the digital education, extensive use of the technology, and therefore all of us should be familiar with that. And I am sure Mr. Dipendra will explain about that this area. Mr. Dipendra, will you come?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm not allowed to start my video, so can host enable me to start the video or share my screen? Okay, so I'm video, and I think the slides, should I be sharing from my own computer, or you have your? Um, are my slides, which was shared previously, are they already on, or should I be sharing it from my computer?
Sir, I'm sharing your, I'm sharing, sir.
Okay, because I can't share my screen from here, so please, if you can, just bring up first slide there, then.
Yes, sir. It is there.
So can you see it?
No, he cannot see.
Oh,
Sir, yes, tell me.
We can see it. We can just put it on slideshow mode.
Okay, so yeah, let me know, Satishji, when it is ready.
It is ready, sir. You
It's
please go
ready.
ahead.
So, thank you so much, Professor Lime and Satishji, and for this network. It is a great privilege being here amongst all the special educators. What we are talking here about is the digital material, digital information, digital publications, and the guidelines that have been issued from the government of India. They are definitely a very, very big step forward in ensuring that all the information, the digital information, especially related to education, is actually made accessible. Now, we do have our commitment through our laws and our international commitments to make information accessible for all. And as we have said, that all the guidelines that have been put forward, have been put together, are actually aiming towards making information universally accessible, which means that we are not looking at making information which is specially created or recreated for persons with disabilities, but these are the guidelines that if we follow them, then these guidelines will be applicable for all, including persons with disabilities. What these guidelines also do is that it acknowledges that that there is a lot of work which has already happened internationally in terms of gathering standards which apply on digital information. And there are accessibility standards for information that have been adopted internationally. And the guidelines issued by Government of India actually clearly acknowledges and says that we adopt these international guidelines and international standards within our own country. And from there on, whatever additional things need to be done or additional clarifications need to be provided, we will acknowledge and we will incorporate all that in these guidelines that have been issued. So there is a specific section which clearly lists the international formats and international digital formats and the accessibility guidelines associated with those formats. So let's start with like what is the importance of standards. So when we say that there are international standards, so standards is something which allows interoperability. So which means that if we create anything, so there is an example that I would share is that if you go to the market and purchase an electricity plug socket, you are absolutely sure that when you will come back home, that will fit absolutely fine in the socket available at your home or anywhere in your country. And you are also but also you also realize that if you're traveling out of country, the electricity plug that work within your own country will not work most likely in another country. This is happening because the standards for the size of the plug of one country is different to another. Imagine a world where even the size of the plugs was an international standard. So what would have been the result? That no matter where, in which country you would have bought an electricity plug, you would have been sure that anywhere you go into in the world, in any country, the same plug would have worked over there also. But that is not the case. Currently, that uniformity has come only in the national standards, and yet those being standards, sitting in India or sitting in your own country, you can actually know what will actually work in the country where you are traveling, because these are still acknowledged standards and published standards. So this is what standards do. That on the other hand, you see that I'll give you another example. You buy a smartphone in India, an Android phone or whatever, whichever phone you buy it in India, and you travel to USA or Japan or any country, your phone will still work when you go there and start working. In fact, your own mobile phone number that you SIM card that you have in your country, if you um, uh, enable international roaming, your own phone number will work anywhere in the world. That is where the difference come between the first example and the second example, that at least when it comes to mobile phone SIM card standards, it is the international standard adopted internationally, adopted by each and every country. The same standard has been adopted by each and every country, which ensures that these smartphones are interoperable. No matter in which country you go, your phone and your SIM card will actually work over there also. So this is the huge advantage of standards. And standards are in a simple language. If we say what is a standard, standard is a simple collection of rules of how any specific hardware, software, or document should be produced and rendered. So this is what standard really means, and adopting international standards, you get interoperability. The second very big role that standards play is that when we come to our own topic, like what are the requirements for persons with disabilities? Now when it comes to information access, the requirements of persons with blindness are absolutely different to the requirements for persons with, say, hard of hearing. Now there, the audio material will have to be converted either into text or in sign language. Even if there is a sound of closing of the door in a video, you have to add a text saying that sound of closing of the door. Whereas for persons with blindness, it's the opposite. If there is any visual information, that needs to be converted into audio. Now these are very different requirements. Same way for children with cognitive impairments or learning disabilities, their requirements would be very different to what are the requirements for persons with blindness or low vision. Now, how would a developer or a content creator know about specific requirements for each and every category of persons with disabilities? They are not experts in disability. They are software developers, they are content writers of a specific subject. They might be very good in mathematics or science for writing a book, but they are not disability experts. How would they know that how to represent or how to present this this document so that it is accessible to all? So standards play a huge role there, because these accessibility guidelines are there, which clearly list out in a very verifiable, validable way that how an information has to be represented. And so it makes it very simple. What we say is that if you are creating a website, just comply with web content accessibility guidelines. If you say that if you have to make your digital publication accessible, please make it accessible make it into an EPUB and following EPUB accessibility guidelines. And there are softwares that will help you check whether your content is actually complying to those guidelines or standards or not. So, um, so, so once this compliance report is given that yes, you are WCAG compliant, you actually are in a way saying that my content is now accessible in its basic way, and it will be usable by any kind of assistive technology being used by different persons belonging to different disabilities. Without knowing in detail what each disability's requirements are, yet if you follow standards, you are ensuring that everybody will be able to use it either directly or through their assistive technology that they are using. The another very big role that the standards play is that it defines accessibility. So now, for example, our Act, the Persons with Disabilities Act in India, says that all the electronic and information has to be made accessible for persons with disabilities. But then the question comes that, okay, now I would like to make it accessible, but what is the definition of accessibility? So for any person, so for example, we are right now moving very fast towards procurement policy. So whether it is the technology is being procured for mainstream users in a mainstream environment, the accessibility clause will have to be adhered to. Now, how would a person who's buying this, or who's placing an order for buying a software, how would they know that what is accessibility? So there also standards play a huge role, because where the Act says that it has to be made accessible, the further the rules and these guidelines which have now been issued by the Ministry of Education here clearly defines that accessibility means adhering to web content accessibility guidelines, or accessibility means creating your EPUB documents adhering to EPUB accessibility guidelines. So this one single word defines what accessibility is when it comes to the user interfaces, etc. I'll move to the next slide. So who creates these standards? So whereas it is being said that these guidelines, of course, are not etched in stone, but when it comes to standards, it is actually quite a big process that goes through, and there are standards organizations that register these standards, and they make it very strong, binding, that yes, this is what the standard really means. You don't have to fear about anything now. There's nothing fluid. There is no ambiguity. Here are the set of guidelines that you have to follow. So in a way, it becomes slightly etched in the stone. But then these standards keep evolving. So today, if I have web content accessibility guidelines version 2.0, in 2 years, 3 years time, or already after a few years, the web content accessibility guidelines 2.1 were released, which were an improvement, or they included the requirements of the changed technology or the new technology trends. Similarly, right now work is already on in the World Wide Web Consortium on creating web content accessibility guidelines version 3.0, which will eventually come in a few years' time. Standards creation is a lengthy process. Normally, when we start defining a standard, it takes at least 2 to 3 years' time to finalize those standards. So that is why these standards are extremely important to follow. They make it easier for implementing accessibility within our own countries, within our own policies. And that is why we have acknowledged these international standards in our guidelines, that at least just go ahead and follow these standards, and then understand where more needs to be done to make your content fully accessible for all. Because there are some things which may not be covered under the standard. Some things like simplified language. Now, obviously, a standard cannot exactly define in black and white what do we mean by complex language and a simple language. That is something which is related to our cognition level, and what is a simple language for a graduate student may not be a very simple language for a student, for a child of say 10 years old. So that this definition itself of simplified language keeps changing. So those kind of things are some things that will obviously we need to be done over and above what the standards say. But these standards would at least ensure that the basic accessibility of the content is ensured by all persons with disabilities. So the key standard organization, one of course is ISO, which is the International Standards Organization. It recognizes and registers these standards. For example, the EPUB guidelines are an ISO standard. Similarly, EPUB accessibility guidelines that ensures accessibility of EPUB are also ISO guidelines, ISO standard. They are registered with ISO after being gone through the whole process of standard development. Similarly, every country has its own standards organization, like there is Bureau of Indian Standards in India. Um, uh, and these are the registration authorities, but who creates those standards? Who writes those standards? So there are industry associations, there are expert groups, there are experts agencies who actually go ahead and writes those standards and then get them registered as international or national standards with the standards bodies mentioned above. So one of the biggest examples of who creates standards is World Wide Web Consortium. We also have DAISY Consortium that writes standards, that creates standards for digital books, especially for persons with print disabilities who cannot read normal print. There is International Digital Publishers Forum, for example, which is an industry association, which includes players like Amazon, who has Kindles, or Google's, or Microsoft, or all these major giants of disseminators and creators of digital information. They came together as International Digital Publishers Forum and created this standard for books called EPUB, now which is merged actually now with the World Wide Web Consortium. Similarly, there are few examples of private.
EPUB-এর কথা কে বললো জানো? তুই বলেছিস? EPUB কবে বললি জানো?
বলেছিলাম কোনো কারণে publication।
Sorry, somebody has their mic unmuted. Can you please mute yourself?
এরাও বলছে।
Yeah. So so there are some industries also who create standards, like PDF is a creation of Adobe company. They have published the standards or the guideline or the standard for their document type as a ISO standard now. And similarly, Microsoft has standards for their documents publications. Similarly, Unicode is a very important standard actually for us to understand. Unicode actually defines digital codes for each and every alphabet of every language of the world. And so the fonts that are created, they must comply to Unicode standard. And if that doesn't happen, it completely breaks all our accessibility tools. It breaks a lot of other things for mainstream also, but for persons with disabilities especially, it actually completely breaks. So anything which is like a Hindi document, Hindi language document, and if the font used there is not Unicode compliant, there is no way how that document could be converted into Braille or into audio formats. So we are also looking at what is the standards ecosystem, which is again has been explained and incorporated in the guidelines issued by the Ministry of Education. We acknowledge that the accessibility standards need to be applied to all the components of the supply chain. So, and this supply chain, what does it include? It includes creation of the digital content. So content itself, the digital content, the documents, the digital publications, the digital format books that you are actually disseminating over internet or giving it on CDs or anywhere, all these digital documents, publications, they need to be accessible. And what would make them accessible? Of course, you would make them EPUB and adhere to EPUB accessibility guidelines. So, and if you are doing a PDF file, you have to then again follow PDF accessibility guidelines to make your PDF file accessible. Similarly, a Word file has to adhere to Word accessibility guidelines to make it accessible. So this is what it comes to digital content. The second important component of the supply chain after content is the dissemination part. How are you distributing? How are you providing this digital content to others? Most likely, you would actually be doing it through a website. So like there is a Diksha portal of Ministry of Education where all these digital documents are getting together. There are online libraries, protected online libraries like Sugamya Pustakale, which is the national aggregator, because on Diksha portal we can actually put content for which the Ministry of Education holds the copyright, or else there are a lot of Creative Commons or copyright free materials that will go on the Diksha portal. But what happens to all the materials that are being published by various publishers which are not accessible, but the copyright doesn't, they are copyrighted and protected by copyright, and the copyright exists with those publishers. So what we have created in India is that we have given an exception that if your content, original digital content, is not accessible, then we have the right to make it accessible to ensure right to education for persons with disabilities. But there is a caveat there. There is a condition there that this content will not be made accessible universally. It has to be done only for persons with disabilities. So that is where the role of online platforms like Sugamya Pustakale come in, where we would incorporate all this copyrighted material also, which is converted into accessible format. We are able to distribute it to persons with blindness and low vision. So these are the distribution channel of content. And of course, these also need to be made accessible, because if these are not accessible, how would I, as a person with disability, be able to search and download content which is accessible? Third component which comes is the reading system. So if I download my this EPUB file, and if I use a EPUB application to open and read an EPUB book, whether that application is actually usable with my assistive technology or not. So these are three very important components of the whole ecosystem supply chain, and each of these components need to be made accessible to ensure accessibility. Because even one of these is not, if it breaks, then the whole chain, the whole circuit breaks, and the end result would be that the whole effort of making other things accessible will go waste, because finally the things will not work. Now the flow of these standards, actually, let us come to that part. The last line which says in this very slide is that we first of all define a standard, then we also create authoring tools which allow us to create content according to that standard. And an example for that would be that all the standards, whether like Web Content Accessibility Guidelines or the EPUB Accessibility Guidelines, says that we have to provide alternate text for images. That if we insert any image, we must provide alternative text to that image describing exactly what that image is about. Why we have placed that image in our document. Now, if I insert an image in my Word document actually has a very simple method of right-clicking on that image, and it will give you add or edit alternative text. And I can simply type in my text there, and that text is added. So there is this authoring tool, there is this Microsoft Word over here in this example that I'm giving, works as an authoring tool which will allow me to create content according to adhering to that standard. So the second important component is that after the standard is acknowledged or registered, we need authoring tools to create content according to that standard. The third part comes as the reading system. Then I need reading systems that allow me to play or to read that content, to render that content which is adhering to that standards. So I need a good reading system which will allow me to change font size, change contrasting colors, change distance between lines and words, etc., or render accessible maps properly, or provide a speech output to the alternative text whenever an image comes. All those things become we would call it a standard compliant reading system. Then we also have validators as part of the workflow, which means that if I have to create an EPUB file with accessibility guidelines, I need a tool to validate whether what I have created is actually accessible or not. Similarly, and then there are trainings. So capacity building of content creators, software developers is required, and there are training materials, etc., which are part of this ecosystem. The whole flow of standards, authoring tools, reading system, validators, and then the capacity building or the training of the content creators. So this is the whole workflow of implementation of standards for any particular aspect. So here are examples of what kind of standards have been recommended and what are the validation tools which are available for it. So for digital text, so we say that their digital information can come to us in these formats. They can be digital text, they can be graphics, they can be audio, they can be video, and all these things have to be accessible and adhere to accessibility guidelines. And we must be able to validate whether those things are actually accessible or not. So if you have digital text, create it in EPUB and make it accessible with following the EPUB accessibility guidelines. And then there is accessibility checker for EPUB, which is a free tool, open source tool available. So if you create an EPUB file, run this tool, give your ACE, the EPUB file to this ACE, and it will tell you whether that is fully compliant or not. Easiest way to check is that if you are creating a Word file, there is something called accessibility checker built in right into your Microsoft Word itself. So if you created a document, you run that checker tool, which is a validation tool, and it will actually tell you that, okay, here is an image which you haven't actually provided alternative text to. Your headings are not properly leveled. So all those kind of issues, it will flag and it will tell you to how to correct it also. So these are the roles of validators that are mentioned here. So for audio, if you're creating an audio book for persons with disabilities or for anybody, if you make it DAISY format compliant, and there is a validator also, it will ensure accessibility and usability, best usability for everybody, not just for persons with disabilities, mind you. This is what is called about universal design. For validating videos, of course, you have to adhere to the web content accessibility guidelines themselves and the accessibility checkers like AXD or other tools, several tools which are mentioned in the guidelines that we have issued. All these are part of those guidelines. All these information is shared there. And as I mentioned about Unicode, these are also part of it. So this is a brief about what role accessibility standards play. What are the various accessibility standards that have been acknowledged, which have been now, said that yes, we are going to follow all these standards in the content that we must create in India to post it on Diksha portal or other places. And this is how we are going to make our information completely accessible to all. Thank you so much for your patience. Back to you, Sandhya ji. Satish ji, Dr. Limay.
Sandhya ji, Sandhya. Anyway, I think Sandhya maybe somewhere. So I think the presentation made by you, Dipendra, is very, very informative, and I think we need to understand more and in details. Now we will ask next speaker, Madam Jayanti, to speak, and I will share your screen now.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Namaskar, everybody. Thank you so much, Satish ji, for this opportunity, and also Sandhya ji and all who have organized this very wonderful visibility program for the work that Anupam ji and team has done in terms of access to children with disabilities, e-content access to children with disability. Thank you all so much for the opportunity. Now, we've been listening to Anupam ji, and every teacher listening, I'm sure you would have geared up to see that your children with disability in your classroom are all going to be getting the education that is appropriate for them and to get, and also listening to Manocha ji, you know that there is so much that without knowing we have been using, and there is much more to know also to get the best of technology. It is with us, but we are not using them adequately. And we could sense that as one. And the second is that we need to learn much more to do it. Here is the third subsection that we are seeing is another set of children with disability who have their involvement of intellectual capacity, perhaps, that comes in the way of their learning in different ways. Children with intellectual disability who have limited cognitive ability, children with autism spectrum disorders who may be having average or above average intelligence, but have difficulty in socialization, communication, atypical socialization, communication skills in them, and restricted interests. And those who have a combination of more than two disabilities or more. And they're all students with us, and we have got to be teaching all of them, and all of them have the right to learn what is appropriate for them. Like Anupam ji beautifully put out that every child has a way of learning, and despite the limitations, they have the right to learn. So therefore, how are we going to help them? Please remember, these three clubbed together does not mean they are all the same, but there are certain common factors that can be kept in mind for a teacher when she plans her classroom activities. So to do this work, Anupam ji had said, form your team, and then the team included one expert from ASD, and then experts from National Institute for the Empowerment of Persons with Intellectual Disability, and National Institute for the Empowerment of Persons with Multiple Disabilities, and a technology expert. And we formed the team, and then we started to work on this, and each, first we decided we'll just find out the learning characteristics of each of these groups of children. What are the learning characteristics? Therefore, what is it that the teacher should be focusing on when she comes to the e-content development? So independently, each of the team members brought out the next slide, please. Yeah. So the interesting thing that you find here is three of them worked independently, and they gave the learning characteristics of each of them. And these that you're seeing on the screen were found to be common for all these three disabilities when we develop lessons. Yeah. So that is one. simplify the lesson, always move from concrete to abstract, because these children have difficulty in understanding abstractions. So when there are abstract concepts, try to find something that will call it concrete. I'll give you an example. If you take a child with intellectual disability and you are teaching him travel skills, and then you want to tell him, he has on his pocket his phone number, his school phone number, home phone number, everything, but you want to tell him, if you are lost, go to the nearest shop and then give this card and they'll help you call the person and you will be found. Okay, very nice thing, every teacher does it. But what do you mean by if you are lost? What is the meaning of lost to this little boy here? Think. So we have to concretize it by saying, if you find yourself in a place where everything looks new, everybody looks new, and the place doesn't seem like you're familiar with it, you don't know anything about it, look for a shop with a phone, and then the rest follows, right? So everything that is abstract needs to be converted to concrete for these children to understand. So the lessons that are going to be visual, when you develop e-content, it is going to be of great help for you, because there is going to be multisensorial input to the child. And the second important point, all the three experts said that do not clutter. There should be little at a time, because they take little at a time, process their hard disk here takes a little longer, or they work differently to process the information. So do not clutter, little at a time. Use simple and direct instruction when you prepare lessons for them. There is a possibility that when a new learning happens, the earlier learning can be forgotten for them. You see, the immediate memory may not be as good as we think it is. So keep on checking the earlier learned one. Some concepts are built upon the earlier learned onto the new learn. Unless you learn addition, you cannot do carryover addition. So carryover addition, when you are doing addition, cannot be forgotten. But that's not the case when you are talking about an environmental studies lesson on mountains and oceans, as against a lesson on some other concept. The new concept is learned on mountains and oceans could be forgotten. You see, they are not linked concepts. So make sure that we keep checking the old ones. Make sure whatever they learn are generalized, because generalization is one other area where they have difficulty. Learn in one environment, may not be able to use in another environment unless they are told to do so. So as far as possible, natural environment, if not possible, make sure that there is an inbuilt generalization, and the e-content that you prepare just gets it there right on your screen. I'll come to that in a moment. Yeah, generalization of the learned concept. And like UDL, Madam Ahuja Madam was telling just now about the UDL, the multiple modes of input and multiple modes of representation by the child and multiple modes of engagement. Yeah, so allow the children to have varied ways of responses, so that he expresses and he makes you understand he has understood. This is very, very important for a teacher. I keep talking, I don't know whether my student has understood or not. So give him different ways to tell you, no, I have not understood. Can you show me through a different mode? Or yes, I have understood, let us go ahead. So it is in your hands, right? And then use adaptation wherever we are dealing with also multiple disabilities, right? So wherever adaptations are required, use them. There could be problems with motor coordination. The combination of disabilities are different for multiple disabilities. So usually what you give them, the hardware and the software, both are very customized for each of the children, but there are ways of doing it. And then also AAC and other kind of PECs and AAC and other alternate modes of communication that may be appropriate for them. And make sure that your lessons are keeping their interest alive. And it is because you are using variety, you are making it interesting, you have lovely, innovative, creative activities. So these points that you're seeing on the screen came from all the three groups. They independently worked, but then they came. It's like a little validation exercise, in other words, if you look at it. So let us always keep this as core points when we develop material for education of children with such developmental disabilities. May we see the next one, sir? Next one, please. Okay, so once the teacher is clear, then there is core we have understood, then we have to customize depending upon the need of the children. These are some of the assistive technology and ICT supports that are already available. You don't have to sit and prepare this. All you need to do is go on these websites. They're all given with the e-content booklet that Honorable Minister released, about which Anupamji was talking, has all of these hyperlinked. So you can directly click on it and you can go there, and you teacher need not have to sit and prepare the worksheets. The worksheets are available. This particular one you are seeing called twinkle.com, I find that fantastic. And it is available in Hindi also, not only in English. You have to say the grade level or the class level of the child, or the functioning level, let us say, as I said, borrowing subtraction maybe, or story sums maybe. So the level, functioning level of the child, and ask for worksheets, and then you get worksheets which you may either directly use or make slight changes here and there, and you may be able to use it with the student in your class who has one of these developmental disabilities. It may be appropriate for him. So all these that you are finding here, the Face Sage Social Skills, very good website for children with ASD. If you really see, so much you will be able to learn by using that. So yeah, the booklet, what you are going to download, all of these are hyperlinked. I have just few minutes, therefore I'm just rushing through. You can always go there. Teachers, don't be overloaded. I know all of you have a classroom of 30 children, and then you have children who learn differently. So you don't have to sit and make your papers, but just take a few minutes to go through these websites, select out, and you will know which one is appropriate for Naresh, which one is appropriate for Geeta, which one is going to be appropriate for Sujita in your class. Because you know the children, you know exactly what they will be benefiting from. So don't be in a hurry to go and prepare. Go through this. This is my bottom line for this particular page that I'm showing you. A whole lot of things are there out there. We just need to go there and check out. Next one, please. Yeah. Then you have this modules in that booklet that our team prepared, the group who worked with me. They prepared as exemplars. These also are hyperlinked, so you will be able to see. Anupamji said go up to class 8, the elementary classes, for samples. So we have a class 7 geography lesson, we have a class 2 mathematics lesson, class 3 EVS lesson, and class 8 standard English lesson. So if you just click on these, you will find that some of the concepts, as it is going on, the teacher is teaching it, there are guidelines for the teacher. As she is teaching, it will just say video, click on it, it takes you to an already existing YouTube. So let us say you are talking about the equator, and then the tropic of Capricorn and tropic of Cancer. And then there is this picture, if it says on top video, it is incorporated. Click on it and it takes you to the Google Earth, and then how those 3 imaginary lines are there, the purpose of it. The teacher need not have to go somewhere else to get that, but she just clicks on her lesson on this, and then it connects you to the Google Earth or YouTube or wherever you have made the arrangement to do. And each lesson has inbuilt self-check, so that the child will be able to do the self-check responses. Can be verbal, can be click a button, yes or no, or can be in a written form. There is a little space given for typing it out. So the multiple modes he can use for giving his or her responses through it, that it will register. These are only, given the little time, these are the only 4 exemplars we have made, but I'm sure this is going to give you a lot of insight into how you can go ahead making those lessons, so that all children in the class will be able to learn. And the e-booklet, if you download, that booklet also has all of these are hyperlinked. I'm repeatedly saying this so that you'll have to just go there and click it and you are there with it. So this is briefly on the 3 disabilities, developmental disabilities, where these children have some way or the other an intellectual involvement. So we have to work, maybe hands and legs are okay, maybe not. So the hardware supports are going to be given if there is a problem with their motor ability or sensory ability. But for their intellectual ability, these are the little support systems that we have indicated, may I say, rather than we have given. We have indicated you teachers are brilliant and you will build on it, I'm sure. So these are about the 3 disabilities. Next one, please. I am also going to tell you about, next one, please. Children who have blood disorders and also children who have mental health issues, because these are part of our RPWD 2016 Act. So we cannot ignore these children's education. So we'll just touch upon it, single slides only. So children with thalassemia have low hemoglobin. It's an inherited condition. Low, and they get tired. They need they need to have blood transfusions given. Sickle cell, as you see in the bottom picture, C-shaped cells that you are seeing there, it's looking like a sickle in the bottom picture. That is because of destruction of the cell membranes in their RBCs. And these children also have their own health-related issues, and they also need blood transfusions. And hemophilia is a poor clotting ability. So if the child gets a cut, for you and me, when we get a cut, we press our finger on it for a small cut, we keep holding it, haldi lagate hain aur kuch karte hain, something we do, and then the bleeding stops. But such children can be fatal because their bleeding can be going a longer time, and they also need transfusion. So these are children who also have the right to education. They may be in your classrooms. So you, the teacher, what we need to keep in mind is their physical comfort. Maybe they need a special kind of chair where they are comfortable in sitting, relaxing themselves so that they don't feel fatigue or tiredness. They take a lot of leave because they go for blood transfusion. They are missing lessons. So you may have to make arrangements to reach the lessons to them if they are not coming to school because of their health-related issues. So these are certain things that we need to be sensitive to. We, the teachers, all we need here is our sensitivity and common sense. And that takes us a long way in helping these children learn like other children. They are brilliant children. Opportunity is what they need, and a good understanding, sensitive teacher, right? Next one, please. Nowadays, next one, please. Nowadays, we find a lot of issues related to mental health of children. So many suicides, the examination pressures, and not able to meet the aspirations of father and mother. See the 10th standard, 12th standard children committing suicide, going high. The tolerance levels have gone down. And added to that, now you find that this pandemic has added to depression in a very big way in youngsters as well as adults. A whole lifestyle has changed. When the tolerance level is low, they have difficulty putting up with. And we have to be sensitive again here. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has set up a 24-hour helpline for mental health in all the national institutes and CRCs. And I have come to know that there were people who were about to commit suicide. As a last minute decision, called the lifeline of our Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and 1 hour of counseling, and that person is doing very well. This is my personal primary information I'm giving you, that I heard that it happened with one of my colleagues who was at the desk. So we need to make sure these children can access all the things in the online material. We teachers have to be extremely careful not to let them go to any of those prohibited websites. You know, there are groups of suicide, groups of other mental health things. There are blogs on that. So we need to be extremely careful, we teachers, and educate the parents that when these children are sitting with the system, they are brilliant children. They are not anybody with any kind of less cognitive ability or something. So if they are with these, either it is blocked by default, or the supervision is there so that they don't get into the wrong websites which would facilitate their mental health. This is one major message that we have for them. So given 10 minutes, I think I have given my best. That booklet will give you much, much, much more than what you have listened to so far. Thank you again so much for the opportunity given to me, and namaskar. Thank you, Satish ji and Sandhya ji.
Sir, you're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jayanti. Sandhya Lime is getting some problem in network due to rain in Bombay. So she will join as soon as the network will come. But thank you very much, Dr. Jayanti, for sharing this information. I think compiling all these things and experiences by the NCERT and Ministry of Education will certainly help, whether it is assistive technology or ICT is available through the various channels and various platforms, and they have compiled in one book and on this. So I think it will help all of us. Now I would like to invite Dr. Sujata Ban, who is also part of this work. And she is the professor and head of the Department of Special Education, SNDT University. Now over to Sujata Bhan.
Just 1 minute, 1 minute. I'm sorry because of my internet problem was there. Actually, what Professor Anupama Ahuja was talking about the developing guideline for each country, and we have a 4 panel member to talk about the particular type of disability. And I am sure all of them will learn how to develop it content based on the disability. And I'm very aware that it is too short to understand. But I hope the panel member and Professor Ahuja will be part of our team in the future, maybe for workshop, maybe for refresher course, to help all to understand. Thanks a lot. Please, Professor Sujata, please continue.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Once again, Satish ji, can I share my own screen, please? Because I'm
Green is not there.
Will you allow me to share my own screen, please? Satish ji, can I share my own screen, please?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can you stop sharing? Then I will share my own screen.
Okay, okay.
It says it's disabled. Can you enable me to share the screen? Yes. Yeah. Can you? Can you see the screen? Hello? Can you see the screen, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Okay. All right. My video will turn on and off in between. Yes. Okay. First and foremost, I want to thank the Brotherhood organization, Anupam ji, who got me into this project, and Tata Institute, Dr. Limaye, and Sri Lata, everybody, for having this wonderful platform to talk about what we all worked so hard to prepare these guidelines. So thank you very much. And I was involved in developing the guidelines for children with blindness and low vision. So I'm going to share, the time is less, so very briefly, I'm going to share what we did. And you have the booklet to see the details at a later point of time. I don't want to elaborate on what has already been spoken about by Dr. Minocha. He spoke about, how the guidelines have to be perceivable, it should be understandable, operatable, and robust. And even Anupam ji spoke a lot about that. So I will come straight to why do we need e-content? Particularly, a lot of background sound coming. So if one could, switch off the mic, please mute it. Today, in this 21st century, we all know internet is an integral tool for learning and communication. Particularly right now, when we are in the pandemic, everybody's glued to their tablets, laptops, desktops, phones. So we are doing a lot of teaching and a lot of learning is happening through e-content. So it becomes all the more important that we keep in mind what is important, how do we prepare things for our children, particularly with disabilities. If we don't do that, there will be a lack of accessibility of learning material for these children, which creates a lot of gap between them and the non-disabled peers. A lack of knowledge leads to lack of employment, which leads further to lack of good quality life because low income jobs for them. So we know for a fact that it is important and we have to find solutions for these children. Because when we look at children with low vision or blindness, accessibility is a challenge for them. Right? And right from physical accessibility to educational accessibility, it's a huge challenge for them because most e-learning environments are designed for sighted students. They use complex visual images and interactive features. That's where our children encounter challenges. We have to have, kind of applications which translate the contents for them. The most common ones which we see are the screen displays into accessible forms by screen readers and screen magnifiers for children with low vision. But many a times what we see is that the information that they provide, it is not fully, I would say, complete, or it's inaccurate information. Now, as a teacher, when I look at these guidelines, it all seems Greek to me. I'm talking from a teacher's perspective. It seems so technical. So what is that as a teacher I keep in mind? How do I prepare my e-content? Will I be able to do it myself? Well, the more I read about it, the more I feel inequipped because it's a lot of technical support that you will require for developing e-content for these children. But what are the simple things that I have to bear in mind? This is what we've spoken about in this book, Focus on the typical needs of a child with a particular disability. Since we are talking about low vision and blind children, so we must understand that all children who have visual impairment are not the same. Their impairment is a result of variety of conditions and which will have a variety of impact on them. So as a teacher for the blind or low vision, I need to communicate what are the needs of these children to the technical experts. For example, we know that the type of vision loss will not be the same. They may have peripheral vision loss or they may have central vision loss. So the pictures below will show you if they're accessing anything on net, this is how it will look for a person who has peripheral vision loss. Will the child be able to access everything? No. If the child has central loss, again, you see, this is how the screen will look. Will the child get complete information? No. So what are the implications? How do we find solutions for these children? Similarly, what is the extent of loss? There may be children who are totally blind, but then not all are totally blind. The implications for totally blind will be different from those who have low vision, who have some residual vision, if trained well with visual efficiency exercises, can use that vision. So how do we use that vision for the access of all web material? Then again, there will be a difference in children who have either congenital vision loss or those who acquire vision loss later, because that will have a direct impact on their concept attainment. So whatever they see on the screen, the information, will that be enough for them? If they have no concepts, we'll have to give them additional supplementary support, information, maybe other means like tactile means or whatever, in addition to what is there on the screen, because they were congenitally blind and they have no concept. So just by reading or listening, they will not be able to form the correct concept. So we do need to know how and when they were blinded. Then there are personality factors of the children. We have to be sensitive to the cultural background. Are they coming from rural area? Are they coming from urban area? Are they coming from maybe a low socioeconomic background where there may be no access to internet, or any such disadvantaged background? That also has to be, kept in mind. And their knowledge and experience in the use of information technology, their knowledge and experience of using these various tools, because we sometimes take it for granted. Everybody has a smartphone nowadays. Everybody knows how to use it. It may not be so. Because again, we know India, it's such a diverse country. There is so much of, the landscape. If you look at it, the haves and the have-nots, it's so diverse. So we have to bear that also in mind when we are developing e-content. We have to be sensitive to the needs of each and every child. I think that point was very beautifully highlighted by Professor Jayanti, that each child is going to be different. We as teachers know our children the best. So it is for us to communicate those needs to the technical experts who are going to support us in developing this e-content. Now, briefly, what we've highlighted in this book is also the educational implications for these children. What we have to bear in mind, that if the child is totally blind, then the support given to him, the media that he uses will be braille, audio inputs, digital input, and access to online learning materials with the use of assistive technologies, if, there's a big if, websites follow the accessible web design guidelines. That was in detail discussed by Mr. Manocha. So we have to bear that in mind, that anything we are trying to procure for them, if we are not developing one ourselves, there is a lot of open education resource available in today's time. So if we are going to pick up something from them, make sure that it is in sync with the WE guidelines, EPUB guidelines, all those guidelines we have to bear in mind, that if it is aligned with that, then it will be good to use that. Now, if we are having low vision children, then of course, large print is what will be accessible for them. Digital, obviously, as I showed you in my previous slide, that if the child is missing out on the whole picture, is only having, maybe because of central scotoma or peripheral scotoma, is only able to see a part of the information, he will not be able to comprehend that. So then maybe they will be also using platforms and resources which are used by the totally blind. Then there are children who have color blindness. They have sensitivity to certain colors which they are not able to perceive well. So again, by choosing the material, we have to bear that in mind. And contrast sensitivity. Some children are able to see the material only when it is in good contrast. I've shown a picture over here, so you can see what a good contrast is, what a bad contrast is. And now each child's contrast sensitivity is also different. So again, the same thing, we know our children, we know what their contrast sensitivity is. Accordingly, we choose the materials. Few things as a teacher, what we need to bear in mind. Again, I'm not getting into the technicalities because the technical stuff will be taken care of by the technical experts. But as teachers, my focus is always on that. And this is what we focus, our team focused on, what the teachers have to look at. So when we are using any resource, just focus on the text used there, avoid italics. Any, the font size, the font type that is used, just use the regular sentence form. You have small caps, and we sometimes use big caps to highlight something. That is not good for a low vision person to comprehend. It's best we use the sentence kind of structure, where it's not just all small caps or just all caps, or we have decorative fonts like, for example, Comic Sans. So rather stick to your Times Roman or Arial or Verdana, which is simple, not complicated, and don't get into the decorative form, because many a times we feel, the material that we use for our children, it should look visually appealing. But when we are dealing with children who have low vision, the focus should be that, is that element adding any information, or it's just beautifying the thing, but complicating? It becomes a visual clutter for that child. It's not going to help him. Similarly, when we are talking about text, the spacing between the lines, it should be 1.5 ideally, rather than single space. Then further guidelines which we have to bear in mind is, when we are focusing on text, ensure that the content is text-based. When we use an image in the PDF form, it cannot be recognized by a child who has a visual impairment, and it cannot be even read by any screen reader. So avoid that. And make sure whenever we are using any website that there is very smooth, effective navigation possible. For example, when we're browsing, the headings, how does the child know that this is the heading, this is the subheading? So there is a proper format for that. The WCAG gives us guidelines for that the child will be able to understand this is the main topic, and then there are subtopics, and then there are subpoints to that, and numbering of tables, bullets to be inserted, so that the navigation for a child who is blind and low vision or with low vision is smooth for him. He is able to comprehend exactly what is expected, while any other sighted person would comprehend that, go through that. Now, whenever there are pictures, it's important that all the pictures are very well described. Any website you open, you will see pictures, right? So pictures communicate a lot, but so our child with low vision or blindness should not be deprived of that additional information. So the images have to be described very clearly to the minutest detail so that this child does not miss out on anything. As I mentioned, there is an issue with color blindness. If the child has color blindness, then we have to ensure that the color contrast and the choice of colors is such that the child with low vision or blindness can, particularly here this refers to child with low vision. So effective color contrast has to be maintained when we are using colors. Another very important thing is audio description. Now, when we look at some, say, for example, a video, a lot is communicated through body language. Now, for a visually impaired person or even with a low vision child, those, the subtle nuances sometimes may be missed. So the visual content, when it conveys more through a storyline, it has to be supplemented by audio description tracks. That is very, very important. And, nowadays, even many movies come with audio description, like all blind people, they love to watch movies because they get that auditory input, but then they miss out on many things where there is no auditory input, right? So there, this audio description plays a very important role. So they get to know exactly what's happening on the screen, which is purely visual without any dialogue. So even while we are choosing any material for them, we have to make sure that there is audio description of such stories, such instances in that video. And something, again, very simple, which is very obvious when we are using CAPTCHA, the content uses CAPTCHA, then it should be voice enabled for children with low vision and blindness. And I feel, whatever content we are using, it should follow UDL principles nowadays, because we have to kind of internalize that. We have to understand that now we are focusing on variability in the class. It's not about disability so much. So we have to make sure whatever OERs we are using, whatever materials we are using, it is UDL based so that all the learners in the class benefit from that. And particularly when we are looking at all the learners, it will automatically take care of our children with disabilities as well. In this book, you'll also find one video that we have made based on UDL principles. The link I have shared here, please watch it. It is based on UDL, and it's with the sign language, with closed captions, and with Braille input. So it will be interesting for you to see. Again, one word of caution, as I'm going to say, it took us a lot of technical support to make this video. So how easy it will be possible for all teachers to make such content, it's $1 million question. But becoming aware of it, what are the guidelines? I think this helps us at least in choosing what is already available. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are things available. So we have to be very vigilant, very conscious about what we are choosing for our children in the class. So having said that, I will stop here because there is time limit, and please go back to this wonderful book that has been prepared, and you will find a lot of inputs there. This is the, it's given in the book, but I'm just sharing it with you here. It's on the YouTube. You can access that, and you will see how the UDL principles have been incorporated while developing this video. Thank you so much. I hope I've stuck to my time limit. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chatabhan. You explained so well, very nice presentation and pre-tai. And I'm sure many of them must have understand. Many of them may have understand what we are talking about that. However, it becomes a tough job for all of them to convert it to the practical one. And I hope they will do this one. One again, thanks, Professor Bhan. Now I would like to invite Dr. Sudha Acharya, and then she will talk about the e-content for the children with specific learning disorder. Please come.
Yeah. A very good evening and namaskar to all the listeners, and I feel privileged to be a part of this webinar. I'm talking about SLD. SLD mostly comprises a heterogeneous group of children with the main impairment being cognitive processing. This leads to challenges in academic performance and has psychosocial implication also. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. There is a deficit in processing language, spoken, written, that may manifest itself in as a difficulty to comprehend, speak, read, write, following multiple instruction, spell, or to do mathematical calculation, and include such condition as perceptual disability, dyslexia, which we say difficulty in reading, dysgraphia, we say difficulty in writing, dyscalculia, difficulty in calculation, and dyspraxia, difficulty in motor planning. Next is Satishji. Okay, focus is on reading, writing, comprehension, mathematics, perception, attention, and memory and social skills. Each child with SLD comes with a unique set of limitations and strength. All skills may not be affected in a similar manner, which implies that for some, reading is a struggle while maths is a strength, or for some, role play dramatization is a strength and maths is a struggle. So we have to create a unique learner profile. It is an umbrella term for a number of disabilities and characteristics. So first of all, I'll show the slide for dyslexia, that is reading difficulty. Can I, Satishji, can you share my presentation, please? Satishji?
Yes, ma'am, wait a minute.
Yeah. So let me continue with dyslexia. Dyslexia, we commonly understand that there is reading difficulty or issues in learning. So child faces difficulty in sequencing, breaking sounds to read words, or especially related declarative learning, or confused with similar sounds. Words, difficulty with closer differentiations, or blending sounds, joining sounds to write words, mispronouncing words or phrases, decoding and coding words. So these are the majorly the children where they find difficulty in the teaching learning process. So possible strategies or e-learning teaching learning guidelines are audio books with captions to read along or read along activity, audio and visual story starters. These children have got huge organizational skill deficit. So generally we do sequencing, like in a story, we say just start the problem, next or now, then and close. So a lot of sequencing is required. So we use the podcast, crossword games, spell check. There are softwares available like Grammarly or Ginger for punctuation, correcting spellings. And Satishji, next. So spell check and crossword games, speech to text tools, text to speech tools. Already we have recently got NCERT audio books, which will be hugely beneficial for SLD students, and games on phonetics with visual clues, fill in the blanks, put in the missing word, or like K and C. K with ka and C like kicking or kite, even with C like color and cake, or confused with similar sound words like cat, bat, mat, rat. So we have to give them our cardboard and blackboard. These are problematic for these kind of children. So reading windows with timed opening. We have got reading windows with timed opening to increase the pace of reading or to slow down the pace of reading. Tracking of words on screen, identifying the words on audio cue, or we have to break down the concept. Whatever teaching learning process, when we are transacting, a very small part of the content can be transacted at a point of time. So use word family similar pattern like ill, meal, will, kill, or reinforcement of sight words. Where phonetic game cannot be applied or we cannot use the rule of phonetics, then we use the sight words. Here I have shown keyboarding ideas, audio books, podcasts, sequencing story, games, crossword puzzles. Those who are little high functioning, they really enjoy Scrabbles, audio and visual with captions. Next, Satishri, dysgraphia, I want to go. Dysgraphia is writing difficulties generally. Children who have got writing difficulties, most commonly in schools, we find writing and reading problem and comprehension problem. So in case of writing difficulties, we find graph motor issues, information and relationship, difficulty between size, form, shapes, arrangements lead to illegibility in handwriting. Very slow and sloppy, unusual hand and proper body and holding a pencil, grip of pencil, incorrect use of pencil like that, pen or pencil. So the strategies will be tracking on the screen for better formation. Digital graphic organizers or mind maps are very, very useful for these kind of children. Pattern writing for graphomotor, correct letter formation input, practice writing with correct grip, spacing and proper paper orientation, and providing choice between labeling and drawing diagram. Frequent use of graphic organizer, as I said, mind maps, pointers, highlighters, or story maps. This will ease out the difficulty these children face in determining the correct and logical order of letters or words and ideas. So they have very unusual hand and paper, body and positioning, pencil, pen, awkward gripping. So that we need to take care while we are transacting in the class. Next one is dyscalculia or math difficulty. So here the difficulty mostly in differentiating the symbols like plus, minus, multiplication, division, understanding math language greater than, less than, difference, product, etc. Or understanding the fact like time and money concepts, fractions, decimals, angles or conversion concepts, or performing basic operation and mental calculation. In mental math, these children will be very, very sloppy. So sequencing in solving problem and comprehending story sums, these are their difficulties. So possible strategies we can think of: highlight the signs and symbols, use flashcards, huge flashcards or large flashcards, reinforcing the concept regularly, hands-on experience like clock activity, preparing timetable using analog clock, etc. Highlighting keywords such as for addition, we mostly use the words like total, sum, altogether, or in all. If continuously we continue to use these kind of words, this will be very beneficial for these children. Similarly, for subtraction, left, minus, what is the difference? These are the keywords. Using acronyms or mnemonics like King Henry died, mother did not cry much. So we have got a lot of mnemonics like that, which really help children. Later on also, I'll bring out a very interesting mnemonic. Use of math kit, protractor with marker, or recognizing the angles and making angles. This will also help these children. Next one is dyspraxia. Satishri, next. Dyspraxia. Here, this is also known as developmental coordination disorder. Here, the children mostly have difficulty in planning and organizing thought and task. Very poor balance between body posture, very clumsiness, they trip, They falter very quickly, poor hand and eye coordination, very fidgety, more than other children. We observe that in the classroom, or hard to focus on one thing for long. So less sensitive to non-verbal signs. These children mostly need verbal prompting or physical prompting. So they do not really respond to non-verbal signs. So possible strategies here, very clear-cut, short instruction, specific praise for reason. They should know why they are being praised and what is the reason. Maintain a balance between assistance and independence. Keep the environment very, very predictable as possible, because they cannot think about unpredictable, unfamiliar situation. They cannot comprehend that. So remove all distractions and develop a buddy system. Buddy system works wonderfully. As practitioner, I can tell you. So buddy can help children with SLD very nicely. So develop a buddy system. As I was saying, that if you are doing reactive series of metals, most to least. So my teacher has developed a mnemonics, Kedarnath ka Mali, आलू जरा फीके से पकाते हैं. So Kedarnath, K stands for potassium, Nath, Na stands for sodium, Ca stands for calcium, Mali, Mg stands for magnesium, Alu, aluminium, Al, and Zara, zinc, so Zn, Fike, Fe for iron, and Ac, tin, Sn, and pakata hai, Pb for lead, and hai, H for hydrogen. So this kind of teaching learning method will really help them. So these are a few examples which I said, or otherwise, suppose we are teaching transport system, we can develop mind maps like land, water, air, and then show them different medium of transportation, like I'm showing you here. Mind maps provide multisensory experiences using multiple intelligence, highlighting important points, and font to text mnemonics, as I have already said. One very important point I want to stress here, that is multiple ways of presentation, expression, and engagement. Already Professor Anupam Mahuja described it beautifully. Each child can learn and thrive if we provide the comforting, caring, compassionate environment with accessible information. So if I can give you any one example, suppose my subject is economics, I'm coming to the class to teach the concept of demand. So how do I present this? If I'm going to, there are different streams like science, commerce, and humanities. So their aptitude, their preferred intelligence also varies. So I will present the same concept in a different way. So I can present it in the form of a demand curve, in the form of demand equation. I can explain what is a demand statement, like a certain quantity of a commodity at a certain price at a certain time period. But if I give really example that I buy 1 liter of milk every day at 60 rupees per kg, and then I say that this is the demand statement. Now I explain that what are the keywords in my statement. There are 3 elements. One is price, one is quantity, and one is time. So I would tell them that wherever you see that 3 elements, keywords are there, that is a demand statement. If I say I buy 1 liter milk every day, this is not a demand statement because the price and time are missing. So when I do that, so multi-sensory technique, that is presenting the content visually and then auditory mode, giving a little tactile experience will be very, very example. Suppose I'm teaching elasticity of demand. Elasticity is responsiveness. So if I take a rubber band and stretch it, so it is stretching. So that means I am applying force and it is responding. So this is little learning by doing. I'm showing a ruler and then I'm stretching, it is not stretching. So that means a product is elastic. If price is increasing, we buy less. So the product is said to be elastic. This is a very simple way of explaining them. So if I bring in local content, regional content into the class, the child feels that he or she belongs to the class. Similarly, organizing my instructional materials. So children with SLD have difficulty in organizational skills. While planning and presenting the information, it is essential that it is structured, systematic, and related to their lifetime experiences. If I'm teaching diminishing marginal utility and I say you are very hungry, your mother is serving one chapati and second and third and fourth and she continues, will you get the same level of satisfaction every time you eat another chapati? No. So what your usefulness of eating chapati is going down. So if I give some example, concrete example related to their daily life, then only children will understand in a better way. So similarly, multiple ways of expression, providing students with many ways to express their learning. Provide opportunities to the students so that they express their learning. Children with SLD will benefit when we give options to respond. Alternative assignment formats like oral assignment, video presentation, or instead of written, reducing the length of the assignment, giving the work in short formats, allowing portfolio, or we ask the child in last term, what are the challenges you have faced, or what is the new skill you have learned, or how much you stretched yourself to learn something. So this is child's portfolio. Give them opportunity to make their own portfolio so the children can express in varied ways. Next is multiple ways of engagement, providing multiple means of engagement. So real life example here again, children with SLD will perform better when there are concrete examples and real life experiences. Real life experiences and personal contact. Ensure that examples, activities are relevant to the student's life. It's not bookish, and go much beyond textbook. And interest level of children, like suppose with NEP, we are shifting, there is a whole paradigm shift from content-based teaching learning practice to conceptual based or clarity and understanding or project based or experiential based. So allow students more options to choose methods that support their interest and skill level. Let them learn how to learn and let us not tell them what to learn and why they are learning. So at different skill levels, such as allowing students to select topics of their interest for final projects or doing any project, or allowing them to be creative in how their projects are presented, in presentation, in conceptualization, where they want to go, from where they are collecting data, everything we can just do hand-holding, but give them the independence to select their own project and method of presentation also. This will help in sustaining attention and interest of children with SLD. Opportunities for hands-on activities, as I said, experiential. The text discussion will be better understood when time to time hands-on activity is given to substantiate the learning part. So these are basically, then we give them touch, feel, or like 5 learning strategies. We say that high 5 strategies through e-content. Of course, it is available by touching, by feeling, through puppets, through story, through music, through drama. So varied experience of learning. Here I have shown a little bit regarding teaching for comprehension, that is pictorial representation of stories. During this COVID-19, the whole chapters we have presented our students in pictorial form, or sequencing of the event, or online quiz, MCQs. Like every time we go to the class, first we want to recapitulate or to take the feedback. There are a lot of apps, we can play quiz with them. There are a lot of simulation game. In my subject, as my core subject is economics, I do a lot of simulation games in the class to bring in all the students at the same platform. Classroom is very, very diverse. Somebody is learning a visual learner, or kinesthetic learner, or textual or auditory learner. So I have to give them varied form of experiences. I have to divide my lesson into different tasks or activities where the child is experiencing his or her, or learning with his or her preferred intelligence. So with differentiation or differentiated learning strategy, or with the use of universal design of learning, we can cater to each learner. So graphic organizer for SLD is a great importance, because they learn it in a different way, and while summarizing the chapter also we use a lot of mind maps. I have seen in my school itself children who were finding it difficult to copy down even one sentence from the board or from the smart board. Now they are drawing mind maps and graphic organizers or Venn diagram, flow chart very fluently. So it is helping them a lot. Next one. Next one, Satish. Next slide, please.
Just give me 1 second, ma'am. Yeah.
Nika, next slide.
Yes, sir.
So keep in mind the visual discrimination of foreground, background, the form, size, color, position of the content on the screen, practice online fun, visual perception games. Like just now Sujata ma'am was saying, we were talking about dark theme, how they can see the background is dark, and if the text is on white, then children are able to comprehend better. So a lot of things are also applicable for SLD children. What Sujata ma'am was showing and Jayanti ma'am also showed, these are equally beneficial for children with SLD children. So this is e-learning and teaching for comprehension. Already I have shown this. Can I show my next slide, please?
Ma'am, this is all we have. This is the last slide. This is slide number 6. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So it doesn't matter. I think 2 more slides are missing. So I'll come to a little bit memory. Shows difficulty in short-term memory. So we can play a lot of memory games, recalling stories, treasure hunt, or presenting content using various formats, providing key concepts, vocabulary as supplement to the text. Using mnemonics and graphic organizer already have said. So visuals for important terms. Similarly for comprehension, as I said you, pictorial representation of the story and then highlighting important events. Using story maps, organizing the sequence of story is really beneficial. Objective type of question, answers, multiple choice kind of question, true or false, fill in the blanks. Now with the assessment pattern changing with CBSE also, now we are going to have our class 12 examination where the first term is completely based on MCQ. So these children, SLD children, we need to train them, especially on the question pattern of reasoning and assertion. It will be difficult for them. Or case-based question where they have to comprehend, and the questions are maybe MCQ type, but they won't directly get the answer there in the paragraph. So we need to train them how they can comprehend and attempt these case-based questions and reasoning and assertion type of question. So skimming, scanning of the text, reading or visualizing main ideas, all these things have to be done in a very short format. I mean, we have to break down the concept into many groups. Otherwise, if you give a long text, or the question paper is very long, a 6-mark question, generally we divide 2 for SLD children. Of course, this is beneficial for all special need children. We have seen that in the school. So these are the basic difficulties which we see among SLD children, basically reading, writing, comprehension, perception, attention, memory, all these things. So mostly in the school, maximum percentage of special need children, they are coming from this category. We have also hearing impaired, low vision, or autistic children, or like muscular dystrophy, physically challenged children. But maximum percentage is SLD. So I have shown you very quickly. These are 5 slides I could show you. So these are few strategies how we can deal with SLD children. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhachi, for the nice presentation. Very practical, down to earth, and point to point that help everybody to understand. I am sure everybody must have enjoyed our presentation with one. And however, based on the diversity disability, we need a specific learning disability. it become more difficult, and then we have to look for this one also. And I'm also wondering about the student with diverse disability in the higher education, how we are going to connect it. So we have a lot of work ahead. This one. Thanks one again to Dhachi for that. This one. Now I would like to invite Britti Chinna for the lecture on the e-content on the for the children with ear impairment. Please do come.
Thank you, Professor Sandhya ma'am. Actually, it is too late, and the topic I am going to present needs all the viewers to listen properly. And as the time is late, so I don't think everyone has a patience to listen me or not. So first of all, I'm thankful to Mr. Satish ji and the entire team of guidelines for e-content development. And especially I am thankful to Dr. Barsa Gattu ma'am, who was supposed to present this presentation, but due to some issues, she couldn't present here. So, is the presentation visible?
Yes, sir. Can you make it full screen? Can you make it full screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, along with Dr. Barsa Gattu ma'am, we are presenting this topic, facilitating learning of students with deafness and hard of hearing, as well as the speech disabilities. Although RPWD Act has specified the deaf as severe to profound hearing loss category and hard of hearing in the moderate level of hearing loss. And speech disability, although it is a difficult, different disability mentioned in the RPWD Act, but we include because most of the deaf students and hard of hearing students have speech problems. And they have their own preference as the group is heterogeneous. No single child with deafness and hard of hearing is similar. So some of them may rely on Indian Sign Languages, some of them may rely on speech reading or lip reading, and some of them with the help of amplification devices, depends on the speech and auditory channel, and some maybe with the multimodal styles, and some with the print or reading. So it is a common belief in the mass that the deaf can only communicate through sign language, which is not true. Early identification and intervention will facilitate their residual hearing with the proper amplification, and they can communicate orally. But it is a common fact with everyone that deaf use sign language. It is not true. So there is a continuum of options like speech reading, oral, print or reading, air writing, multimodal styles, which is available and mostly practiced in the schools for the hearing impaired. So the concomitant risk associated with deafness and hard of hearing and speech disability is the main problem is communication. So primarily they face problem in communicating with the others. As a result, there are various pedagogical challenges faced by teachers in imparting curriculum in the classroom. So this pandemic period has heightened their risk of online learning. Most of them are facing problem in learning speech as well as other mode of communication through online modes. So there is a need for accessible e-content, which has been prepared by the Ministry of Education as well as NCERT. So we have to, while preparing the e-content for these children, we have to see first the introductory video in sign language about the topic which we are going to cover and the subtopics as well as the objectives. And in the end of the lesson, we have to recapitulate related information properly so that they will be able to read and write properly. And we should have the outcome expected from the learners, which are the learning outcomes we are expecting. So these all are to be incorporated in the e-content for the deaf and hard of hearing, as well as scaffolding techniques like glossary, providing glossary and content to contain the relevant day-to-day example from daily life will help them a lot. However, we have to balance between the graphics, visuals and the text, because excess of graphics and visuals will not solve the problem. We have to develop their literacy skills. So we have to make a balance between the graphics and visuals as well as the text. The
Mrityunjay ji.
impediments. Yeah.
Mrityunjay ji.
Yeah, ma'am, you can start. You can start.
Yeah, I will be happy to conclude the last two slides. Thank you, Satish ji, and thank you, Sandhya and Anupam ji. And Mrityunjay ji, because I'm not well, so he has taken over the first few slides. I'll just do the last two slides because that will give me some confidence that I'm recovering. Okay, so while developing the e-content, the most important thing that has to be really kept in mind is for the deaf children, it sometimes becomes pronunciation equal to reading. The whole problem of the deaf children is unable to understand the meaning of the print form of it. So the literacy becomes a roadblock because of the language problems. And that is what I would come to the last slide. And I think that slide will speak everything that I wanted to say. Look at this slide. Whether it is a print media or whether it is an e-content, I have taken this from a child's book. When his teacher, a deaf child, when his teacher asked them to draw a picture of a cat saw a picture of a mouse on the wall, and majority of the deaf children drew what is there on the top. What they do is word by word reading. So a cat, and then saw a picture, mouse on the wall. They don't do what is called as holistic reading. So friends, for the deaf and hard of hearing students, we have to remember that it's not just converting the print into e-content, giving graphic organizers, giving exemplars and giving everything, but it is, the scaffolds which my colleague Mrityunjay ji said. We have to give them glossary page, we have to give them the scaffolds to support their reading. The reading has to be meaningful, and the reading, if it is done by understanding, then I feel whether it is e-content, printed, nothing will bother. So whatever all my previous speakers have spoken about contrast, about font, about graphic organizers and about illustrations, I would also bring to your this thing that even for the diagrams in the e-content, we have to make it very sure as to which is the part is being labeled, because the whole problem of the deafness is comprehension. So let not your children have a cat saw a picture of a mouse as individual icons of each word. Let it be a holistic one. Thank you very much. Over.
So the takeaway message for all, we have prepared this infographics jointly. Barsa ma'am was the key person behind designing this infographic. So early identification and intervention benefits all. Hearing aids and amplification devices is essential for the development of residual hearing. Noise-free environment helps to learn better for the deaf and hard of hearing children. And we have to open the communication options. There are various modes of communication options, and we have to select as per the needs of the child. Sign language is beneficial in communication as education for some. Right to accessible inclusive education must be highlighted. Print and e-content to be supported with pictures and interpretation. Captions and subtitles. As mentioned by Professor Ahuja, that captions and subtitles will be assisting the children to understand the videos. Most of them learn through visually and express manually. Interpreters are vital to bridge the communication between hearing people and these people with DHH. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mrityunjay Mishra and Dr. Varsha Kattu for explaining so well, because it is very difficult to understand what is the meaning of the deaf because of the invisibility. And those who have invisibility, disability, people may not understand the importance of that education. Thanks a lot for explaining well on it one. Now, for overall, the purpose of today's webinar is that to understand the guideline of creating content for the children with diverse disability based on National Education Policy 2020. As National Education Policy 2020 focus more on revamping school structure, radical reform in the curriculum, use of technology and digital education. So during pandemic, it gives food for thought for all of us, and therefore we have a lot of work ahead, because what are the happen in the past, we have to connect the past to current to future, and that becomes more tough job for all of us. This one. Second one, it is realized that whatever we discuss is that we have a lack, so many areas that we lack. For example, of that digital books in the regional language, or limited resources development, or many of them are not familiar with the board, or teachers are not trained well in that teaching, or situation of the children with disability based on the disability. For example, few children cannot sit more than 10 minutes, or those who have a short span of attention, they find difficulty, or you need the capacity. And what about the rural area and remote area? So we have a lot of challenges ahead, and we need to work on this one. However, today's webinar, I am sure and I hope that all professionals must have understand what are the new challenges in the current situation and how we are going to utilize this guideline to develop a content for the another future 20 years or maybe 10 years, because every 5 to 10 years educational pattern change, structure change, need change, and therefore we have to change also. That was the basic this one. And I think based on the response from all of you this one, that we really need 1 day or 2 days workshop just to explain what is the guideline. Maybe the second workshop just to explain how to develop a content on the particular disability, so that everybody will get clear picture about this one. Because this is only guideline, and each school had to develop a content, and it is not very easy job for everybody. And therefore, we have a lot of work ahead this one. And the most part is that what about the student with disability in higher education? So we also need to connect it with this one. Thank you all of you. 1 minute, please. Thank to all of you. Now there is a question and answer, and I would like to request Mr. Rajiv Kumar Sharma, who is the co-chairperson of Global Inclusive Education Network. He will answer all the question and answer. Please, Mr. Sharma, please carry on.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya. And I believe that all the panelists, they have explained their presentations in such a nice manner. And I agree with most of the thank you messages in the chat box, which kept on buzzing in spite of such a long duration of the session. It showed the keenness and the attentiveness of the audience that we have in large number attending this webinar through the Zoom and the YouTube channel. We will conclude soon, but not before attending to some of the important questions which have been already raised in the chat box. And after that, we will also open it to the audience, which is live here in the Zoom link. So let me take this question, which comes from Indumati Rao, and it says, what is the difference between a virtual book and a digital book? Which out of the two is more disability friendly? I open it to the panel. Anyone who would like to respond to this? What is the difference between a virtual book and a digital book? Which out of the two is more disability friendly? Or is there a difference?
More disability wala, banane specifically. Virtual book में सब नहीं होगा ये सब.
I may just start the ball rolling. A digital book versus a virtual book. Virtual book is online and can be accessed, and one can zoom in and pinch out and pinch in, and make all possible adaptations to it for reading. And a digital book is more like a regular book that a child carries in his bag. The only difference is that a digital book can be carried on a laptop. I mean, you could see it on a screen, that whatever form screen the child has. So it gives the child a feeling of it's with me, number one. So her question of which of the two is better, well, it depends again on the learning need of the child, and categorically placing ticking it for one and not for the other is not going to be appropriate. Let the child decide. And I think that would be to set the ball rolling, let the others say. But my take is children pick on what they feel they learn better. So let's give them the options, let them pick. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Anupam Ahuja. I agree with you that it has to be decided by the learner which book, whether the virtual book or the e-book, suits the learning needs of the learner. I'll take another question.
Sir, may I give an example, sir? May I give an example of? I would like to give an example of NCERT e-Pathshala and e-Pathshala AR. E-Pathshala is a digital book, and e-Pathshala AR is the virtual book, where when you scan the QR code, you can get the experiments being done. You can see so many other things also in the digital book. And the digital form of book is digitalized form, or that kind of book. But when it is AR book, e-Pathshala, so you can see many things happening in the digital books. All the animations and all the other things also happening in the digital books. That is more comprehensive. That can cater to more CSN, CWSN children, children with CSN.
Thank you for the example.
Thank you so much.
The next question comes from Dr. Sneh Bansal, and it says, how as a subject expert, we can create accessible digital content? What all consultancy or support or software or short-term course will be required? I believe, again, Professor Anupam Ahuja, if you may respond to this. So this comes from a regular subject expert who may not be creating the content only for the children with special needs or children with disabilities. So what kind of consultancy or support or course or training would be required for this, for a regular teacher?
Yes. First and foremost, Sneji, thank you for a very important question that you have raised. I think that's something that most people watching today must have asked themselves. Do I pick up the guidelines, and will I be able to make digital material for my children? Let's take a bite at a time. I will say that with great caution. We are educationists, and there are people from technology. The idea of the guidelines is that we work together. We cannot develop skills overnight. Though teachers who are working during the pandemic have worked very hard, and they have gone beyond their seams and lines and invented and given children what they could. But we know the struggle they have gone through. And what is very important, Sneji, you will agree with me, is that whatever we do has to be of a certain quality. Dipendra Manocha ji talked about standards. And that's something we should not lose sight of. As a parent, as a teacher, I can do something for my child immediately and put it across. But that's not the end. That's just a small beginning to make the child feel that an attempt has been made to make him or her learn. But to do it properly, we have to do it in a very systematic and technically sound, professional manner. So I can give you more information later. It's late in the day, but this is just to highlight and to also probably give thoughts to many other similar thoughts that may be coming. Over to you, Sharmaji.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Sharmaji, Dipendra Manocha here. Can I add
one more question directly, from
Sharmaji, I think Dipendraji wants to add. Please, kindly.
Sure.
So in this, I think the one thing is that very small beginning, as Anupamji said, it can be made by, just in your Microsoft Word files, some kind of special formatting of some features need to be added. And while you are creating content using Microsoft Word or Google Docs or, OpenOffice, whatever you are using as your word processing software, you can apply certain formatting styles to meet the guidelines of accessibility. And there are online courses that have been developed. So if you can, I don't know, we can share my email ID @daisy.org. If you want to know more about how to make this small beginning, so just make your Word document at least something which will be usable for all. From that, we will be able to derive several formats which will be accessible. So that's a way to begin. And I can say that my email ID is dmanocha, DMANOCHA @daisy.org. If you want to know more about this online course for making your text accessible.
Thank you so much, Dipendraji, for your kind intervention. I believe that you are absolutely right. Quality and standardization, these are the keywords as far as the creation of e-content is concerned. So let's take a direct question from the participants. I believe Ms. Aditi Basu Roy, she raised her hand in case she wants to ask a question. She may unmute herself and ask directly to the panel. Aditi ji, are you going to ask a question?
Yes, sir. Sir, I posted the question, but I can tell you also the question. The question is, suppose in a ideal situation of inclusive education in a school where there is a VI, MI, autism spectrum disorder student, and many other disabilities as CWS and children are together. So in that, and also social marginalized sections of students also there. So in that ideal situation, ideally inclusive situation, how do we cater to the individual need of the students? See, one VI patient, VI student is also there, MI student is also there, and then there's a dyslexic patient is, dyslexic student is also there. And also there are other students, suppose ADHD. We have not addressed ADHD. That is the most common factor in school teaching. So ADHD is also there. So how do you make them learn together in a classroom setup, in a formal schooling setup? Yes, sir. Who is going to answer this?
So the question is open to the panel.
Can I take this question? I'm Sudha.
Please.
Yes, Sudha ma'am. Yes, Sudha ma'am. Nice to see you.
Yeah, I was telling you, like I gave you examples. Some of the students, they are visual learners. So you can use, you have to give them varied experience using their multiple intelligence. Like some children are bodily smart or musically or word smart, like that 8 intelligence we know, but mostly we divide them into visual, auditory, kinesthetic and auditory. And then as I gave you the example in my session also, like if I am dealing with the concept of demand, for a person who is good in number and analytical mind and all, I can give a demand equation, draw the graph and draw a diagram. I can give them data, how demand curve is derived. But otherwise in a humanity section when I go, so I know the limitation. Most of the students, they are not good with numbers, so I give them real life example. I take some teaching learning material. I said very simple, you don't have to spend a lot of money. I just take a rubber band to stretch and give you the example of elasticity very nicely. Life-saving drug, as you increase the price, people are not responding. Salt, if you are increasing the price, people are not responding. So the product is inelastic. So this way I can convince them through explaining, real life example. So there are different ways how I am using multiple modes of presentation. So for visual learners, I have something. For auditory, I have. So I know the dynamics of my classroom. I know each one's learner profile or know your child. So as per that, I have planned my inclusive classroom. All the tasks, all the activities are oriented for all. It is not for special need children. Whatever I am doing in the class, it benefits all. So all my tasks, all my assignments have to be aligned with learning outcome. So what I am expecting, what is the learning outcome or what competency I expect children need to achieve. As per that, I really develop my lesson plan. So you give variety of expression, variety of presentation, and give the opportunity to this child and take the feedback that how much the child has learned, how much the child can apply in real life situation. Thank you.
So, ma'am, that means, are you talking about the IEP, individual educational plan, or you are talking about the how can you implement IEP in a classroom?
Education in IEP generally we make in collaboration with the counselor.
Yes, but how can you
special
implement in
educator,
classroom?
class teacher, even parents also are involved in developing IEP. But this is a general, normal, inclusive classroom where, as you said, children from different socio-economic background and special need children, as so-called below average, gifted child, all are sitting together. So I have to give them such kind of experiential experience or experiential learning, teaching learning process that everybody benefits the most. Even a gifted child has to gain from the class. We have to give the class something to explore more or research more. So while taking care of the last child of the class whose comprehension ability is the lowest, we have to take care of the gifted child also. So we have to develop the lesson plan as per the need of the child.
Thank you so much. And I believe that Mr. Dipender Manocha wants to add something to it.
Yes. So I would say that there are two aspects to the answer of your question. One is very aptly described by Sudhaji. The one aspect is about, so the two aspects that I'm talking about, one is about the digital content itself, where these guidelines apply. And the second aspect is about the teaching methodologies in the classroom, which need to be adopted for various children. So when it comes to content, the key aspect of the content is that the content should be delivered, should be deliverable in various formats. So for example, to seek attention of ADHD children for children with learning disabilities, it may help if the text is highlighted and spoken. Whatever sentence is where the focus is required, that sentence is highlighted and it is also spoken while the text is shown on the screen. This kind of synchronization gives a better chance of comprehension and perception for children with learning disabilities, and it can seek more attention of even children with who are ADHD. Besides this content being accessible for persons with blindness, low vision also. So, when the content comes, if we are adhering to these guidelines that we have mentioned, like these accessibility guidelines, then the reading systems give you these options of rendering the same content in various different ways. So So that's the flexibility that you get, that in your classroom, you have an EPUB accessible EPUB file of the document, and you are using a reading application like Thorium, then you can present this content according to the needs of the child in your classroom as they are there. And this same content can be there on the child's device if a child has a device, otherwise on your common system or a different. So this is all about digital information. So we are not yet talking about face-to-face teaching methodology. That is the part which Sudhaji has already explained. Like if you have this basic content, how to then make your teaching more inclusive. You have to add experiential teaching and other formats according to it. I hope this answers your question.
Absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. It's very nice. Very nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And now, see, keeping in mind the paucity of the time, and I believe that we have already crossed the time that we have decided, but I believe this was a very comprehensive kind of a webinar which covered a lot of ground. So let me, on behalf of GIEN, take this opportunity to conclude this session by proposing a vote of thanks. But before that, I would like to say that last 1 year or so has awakened all of us, to this need of digital resources, particularly the e-content, to continue the process of education without gaps. NCRT, the CRTs, CBSE and various other boards, they have been creating these kinds of resources last year. The increase was exponential in the quantity which was created, but the next important aspect to be kept in mind is the quality and standardization. And the guidelines for the development of content for children with disabilities has come at the right time. This also, is these guidelines can go a long way in the creation of the regular kind of content also. So let's, carry this mission forward to create and promote world-class e-content for all the teachers, including the children with special needs. By saying so, I would want particularly to thank all the panelists, and especially Mr. Rajneesh Kumar, Director, Digital Education, Department of School Education, Ministry of Education, Government of India, and Professor Anupam Ahuja, who represents NCRT, International Relations Division, the chairperson of the subcommittee of guidelines and development for the e-content for children with disabilities, and all the esteemed panelists, including Dr. Jayanti Narayan, Professor Dipender Manocha, Professor Sujata Bhan, Dr. Varsha Gatu, and Dr. Mrityunjay, Dr. Sudha Acharya, and last but not the least, all the wonderful participants, who have been the audience of this webinar. I believe Mr. Satish Kapoor, who worked a lot to make this program a success, shared with us that more than 3,000 participants they registered for this kind of a webinar, and I can say that this was just a beginning, and there will be many more specialized training sessions and webinars, particularly aiming at the particular needs of the participants, and there will be many more such engaging sessions. As of now, I am really grateful and thankful to all the panelists and the audience for making this program a success. We will take it forward in the future also with your cooperation. Last word coming from Mr. Satish Kapoor.
I would also like to thank you everybody, and mainly Anupam Madam, for accepting this proposal to organize this webinar on this issue, which is very close to my heart. And I would like to thank you in addition to all, sir, to this technical support was supported by Anika Singh of Voice Organization, and I would like to thank her and her team also. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Keep safe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. All
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.